Hey hooligans, today we are talking about The Wild Robot, which is Dreamworks' latest animated feature, which once again proves that animation is just one of the best mediums to tell amazing, gorgeous stories. And this might just be my favorite animated movie of all of 2024. Stay tuned until the very end when I tell you my score. But also, I guess, to be fair, there has not been a lot of competition in the animation space. I mean, there was Despicable Me 4, Kung Fu Panda 4, Inside Out 2, the Garfield movie. I mean, it's really, really refreshing to see a movie that is original and not a sequel, although to be fair, this was based off of the book of the same name. Also, fun fact, supposedly this is going to be the last movie that is fully animated in-house at DreamWorks. They plan on, after 2024, outsourcing their animation to different studios. So I can't talk about this review without mentioning the art style and the overall visual aesthetic of this movie. This movie is what Wish wished it looked like. I mean, there were a lot of painterly strokes for textures, there were a lot of 2D particle effects instead of 3D, and the environments looked amazing. It looked like a storybook, and I feel like that's kind of what Wish tried to go for. Although, to be completely fair, the human designs in this movie, although they were very brief, that looked very, very odd. It looked like straight out of like Wizard 101 or something. And of course, one of the best parts of the movie is the robot herself, named Roz. And by the way, her name is Roz because it is short for the Rosm unit, and they all have a number associated with the robot model, but she chooses to go by Roz because she is more of an individual. So the design of Roz is very much like if you combined all of Eve from WALL-E with Baymax, with the Iron Giant, and particularly the robots from Castle in the Sky, especially when Roz was covered in moss. And you know what? That makes a lot of sense because Chris Sanders, the director of this movie, took a lot of inspiration from classic Disney. And you know what? At this point, WALL-E is kind of classic Disney, right? And inspiration from Miyazaki, who of course directed a lot of Studio Ghibli's biggest films, including Castle in the Sky. One really unique feature of Roz is that she can mimic animals. In fact, she kind of learned how animals talk, and that's kind of the justification of why we can hear the animals talking in this movie. But we got to see Roz mimic things like crabs and deers and bears. It was very interesting. And along the same lines, Roz is actually very expressive with how physical she is in this movie. And it helps a lot because the design of the robot itself doesn't have any facial features that typically you associate with emotions like eyebrows, a mouth, even a nose. It literally is just two holes on a circular head. And it helps with the physicality because Roz has a lot of little gadgets on the body that can detach and release different parts of the body to make it look more expressive. In fact, her hand could detach and become like its own little robot and help out on different missions and such that we see in the movie. Roz also had different colors that she could glow. It can either mean that she's low on battery or maybe just to express how she's feeling, and I thought that was also a great choice to help let us know how she feels. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't compliment Lupita Nyong'o's performance because that sold the character of Roz a tremendous amount. I think Lupita had the perfect amount of like this robotic voice mixed with this nurturing motherly voice. I think she's like exactly what Siri wishes she sounds like, but obviously because Lupita is a real person, she can sell the humanity of it more. And of course, the soundtrack of this movie was epic, it was emotional, it complemented every scene, and it was phenomenal. Okay, so now I want to talk about the plot itself to kind of get more into the review. So if you haven't seen this movie yet, this is your official spoiler warning. I will be talking very in depth about the plot. Okay, so the movie starts off with Roz waking up on this island completely alone. And we learn later on that her particular type of robots were actually designed to help humans with their everyday chores and other tasks, and she was actually supposed to be in the main human city, but she was lost in a typhoon with a couple of other robots, and she was the only surviving member. And this actually is very, very similar to a character we will meet later on called Brightbill. Also, the setting of this movie takes place mostly on the island itself, but it's actually in a post-apocalyptic type of world where humans still exist, but we see cities like San Francisco is completely underwater, and humans now live in these like dome-like structures where robots help them garden, and there's like artificial sun. It's kind of like the Fallout settings. So when she wakes up and starts exploring, all of the animals on the island are very wary of her, do not like her, and view her as a monster. And so we see a lot of like the raccoons and squirrels try to take her gadgets and take her eyes and take her different parts. So she kind of starts defending herself and she starts running around the island. Also, shout out to the animal designs. They were all super cute. So while she's running around, Roz ends up accidentally killing this goose and her nest of eggs, except for one egg, who we learn is Brightbill. And this is also where we meet Fink the fox, who is voiced by Pedro Pascal. I think he did a great job, especially selling the comedy, and overall the movie actually had really, really great comedy. There was a lot of physical comedy and some adult humor thrown in as well, but the movie also wasn't, you know, above doing some like fart jokes. I thought the character of Fink itself was funny, but it was very stereotypically a fox character. I mean, if you think of like characters like Nick Wilde, I mean, you think of this cunning, manipulative, maybe mischievous type of character that is misunderstood and then kind of turns around to be good at the end. I didn't mind too much that Fink was basically a stereotype of any fox character that we've seen, since it does serve the story fine. So when Bill Bright finally hatches from the egg, he imprints himself immediately onto Roz. First of all, baby Bill Bright was so cute. I need a baby gosling right now. So the teenage version of Bill Bright is voiced by Kit Connor, who is doing an American accent and actually sounds pretty decent, so good job. So it was revealed later on that if Roz did not accidentally kill the rest of Brightbill's family, Brightbill probably would not have survived because he was born with a deficiency, that he was really small and he had small wings, so he couldn't really fly very well. So because of survival of the fittest, I guess, he probably would have ended up dying if it wasn't for the help of Roz. And so this is why Brightbill has a connection to Roz already, because they are both the lone survivors of their clan, I guess, and now they're both outsiders. I also thought it was very interesting that this little baby goose was having the traits of a robot because its mother is a robot, so I thought that was a very interesting characteristic. So because Roz is designed to complete the tasks of its clients to satisfaction, she is now tasked to raise Brightbill until he is able to eat on his own, swim on his own, and fly on his own. And she has to make sure that this task is complete before migration happens in the winter. But the part that is not available in Roz's programming is how to be a nurturing mother. So she actually ends up being able to reprogram herself to feel more like a natural mother with real emotions, and she's starting to become more human-like, I guess more animal-like as well. So during this time, Fink is living with Roz and starting to develop a friendship with her and is helping raise Brightbill, and they all live in this hut that Roz built, and it'll become important later on. So eventually we get to Roz trying to teach Brightbill how to swim. While Brightbill is learning how to swim, he also runs into other geese and they start bullying him for being different, for being born with a deficiency, and also being raised by a monster. And so being a teenager that he is, he takes out his anger on Roz and is upset with her that she's not normal and it's all her fault that he's being bullied and he's not seen as one of the geese. And this kind of shows the overall theme of this movie. It's all about chosen family and feeling like you belong somewhere. So even though Roz and Brightbill may not fit into their own species, they found their place in the world within each other. And Brightbill learns that lesson at the end of the movie. Eventually, Brightbill also learns how to fly with the help of an elder goose. And Roz continues to help Brightbill train for the migration. Because he is weaker than the other geese, he needs a lot more training to endure the long flight. So during this period, Roz actually ends up losing her leg, and so the beaver creates an artificial leg for her, even though it's made out of wood, which is very interesting because Roz is technically the one that's artificial, but she receives an artificial leg that's made out of natural resources, which speaks even more to her character design because this shows that she is now becoming more and more part of nature instead of this man-made creation that she was intended for. You know what? This is also called the wild robot because not only is she in the wild, she's becoming a part of the wild. So eventually winter comes and all of the geese migrate, and Roz says her goodbyes to Brightbill, and she decides to activate her communication beacon so that she can return back to where the humans created her. But because she reprogrammed herself from earlier, she's starting to feel emotions and she gets really sad at the thought of never seeing Brightbill again. So she shuts off the communication beacon and decides to stay through the winter. So during Brightbill's migration, they actually run into a huge thunderstorm, so they have to seek shelter. And what do you know? The shelter happens to be the city that Roz is from. So there's a bunch of robots in the city and they identify the geese as contamination. So they try to shoot down the geese, but eventually they all escape except for the elder goose, who ends up dying. And this was sad, but honestly, it was a very, very quick thing. They didn't really grieve his death at all, and it was just mentioned briefly. And back at the island, winter comes and there's a huge snowstorm. So Roz and Fink kind of get all the animals into her hut, and this part is where I thought it was a little silly because how are all of the animals on the island fitting on her very small hut? And there were only like one or maybe a few of each species, so it was very much giving Noah's Ark. But regardless, because Roz was able to save everybody, the animals now view her as one of their own. So spring finally comes around again, and all the geese come back to the island, including Brightbill. Roz is about to reunite with Brightbill, but she realizes that he is actually feeling like he belongs with the group now, and so she kind of feels deep down that he doesn't really need her anymore. And just as this is happening, a spaceship arrives to retrieve Roz because she activated her signal from before. And the spaceship is operated by this jellyfish type of robot who is called Vantra, and she wants to bring back Roz for research. And Vantra is actually voiced by Stephanie Sue, who I love. I am such a fan. I wish she would get bigger roles in bigger films, but I'm glad to see her get any role at this point. Roz almost goes along with Vantra, but then she was like, psych, I'm actually gonna go back to go see Brightbill. Vantra is not happy about this, so she ends up sending an entire army of robots after her. This ends up in a huge war between the animals and the robots, but it kind of quickly ends because the animals are actually able to overpower the robots. Now this part I did think was kind of silly also because the robots are supposedly made from very high grade material, but then they quickly get destroyed by some animals. Not to mention these robots are literally equipped with like laser guns, and it wasn't able to do anything to the animals. So either these robots are from Temu and are very poorly built, or the animals are just jacked up on like Compound V or something because they were so strong. But Vantra has one last card up her sleeve, and she causes all of the remaining robots to detonate, and this causes Roz to pass out, and she is able to capture Roz and erase all of her memories. But don't worry, because Bright Bill is coming to the rescue, and he comes onto the spaceship and reunites with Roz and tells her that he loves her and is grateful that she was able to raise him as his mother. And of course, with the power of love, this was able to spark back Roz's memories, and she is perfectly fine. And this reminds me of the ending of WALL-E as well. I think this scene was particularly very well done and very emotional. I think anyone, honestly everybody in the world who has lived with their mother or is in the process of moving out or, you know, leaving the nest can relate to this scene. And this is just a reminder that if you still have the luxury to go hug your mother and tell her how much you love her, I feel like that is one of the best messages from this movie. So Bright Bill and Roz are able to outsmart Vantra and kill her essentially and destroy the spaceship, but unfortunately, because of the battle from previously, a lot of the forest is now on fire and destroyed. And so Roz believes the best solution to keep the animals safe is to return to the city that she came from so that they won't keep coming after her. So at the very end, the resolution of this movie is that the animals are now working together, predator and prey, to restore the forest, and they still very much cherish the memories of Roz. And then we see Bright Bill is able to sneak into the city and reunite with Roz. And I am very surprised that he was able to recognize Roz immediately, because there was a scene previously that he thought another robot was Roz because they all look identical. And it's implied that Roz did get her memories erased, but she was able to get them back again when Bright Bill showed up. So I do think the resolution and the overall ending had a little bit of an issue. It felt a bit rushed. I feel like maybe another 15 minutes could have been added to flesh it out a bit, because I feel like the first 2/3 of the movie was all establishing who Roz is and then building this connection with Bright Bill and then setting up the mission to raise up Bright Bill. So then when it came with the conflict between Vantra and bringing Roz back to the original city, I feel like we didn't have too much time to explore that. But I am glad that they still took time to establish the relationship between Roz and Bright Bill, because that is the emotional core of this movie, and if we didn't take the time to explore that, then the emotional beats would just not have been as good. And you know, if my biggest critique is that I wanted to see just 15 more minutes of the ending, I feel like that says a lot about the rest of the movie and how successfully done that was. So not only did this movie have a fleshed out plot, but it also had likable characters, a great visual aesthetic, an amazing soundtrack. It had a universal theme of belonging and chosen family and community that anybody can relate to. I feel like this movie was able to capture the magic storytelling elements from early Disney movies, as well as the sense of wonder of exploring a new world, just like how Miyazaki does in films like Castle in the Sky and Spirited Away and Howl's Moving Castle. Even though the ending could have been slightly longer and more fleshed out, and there were a couple of parts that were just a little bit silly to me, I thought overall the movie worked very, very well in terms of storytelling, pacing, art direction, everything else. It was wonderful. I give this movie a 4.5 robots out of 5 robots. But I want to hear from you guys now. What did you think of this movie? What were your favorite animals out of the bunch? Did you end up crying at any point in this movie? Let me know. That's all I had for you guys today, and I will see you guys next time. Hey hooligans, thanks for watching this review. If you enjoyed that, then make sure to like and subscribe and check out some of these other videos available right now.